All right, let's get right into it. We're about to unpack an incredible story of integrity and faith, one that's pushed to the absolute limit. And it's all happening inside one of the most powerful empires the ancient world had ever seen. It's really a story about what happens when you decide to stand for what you believe in, even when the whole world is screaming at you to just fall in line. And that really brings us to the question at the heart of this whole thing, doesn't it? I mean, think about it. How do you hold on to who you are when your world has been turned upside down? When your home is gone, your culture is being erased, and you're basically a prisoner in a foreign land? What do you do? How do you stay true? You see, for these young men, Daniel and his friends Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, this wasn't some abstract thought experiment. This was their reality. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon had just conquered Jerusalem, and he cherry-picked the best and brightest to bring back to his capital. Their new job? To learn the language and customs of Babylon and to serve in the king's court. They were literally living in the belly of the beast that had devoured their home.
So their very first test, it didn't happen on a battlefield. It wasn't some big intellectual debate. Nope. It happened where so many of life's real tests happen, at the dinner table. It was a simple choice, but one that was going to set the course for everything else.
Okay, so the king offers them the best of the best, his own royal food, his own wine. Now, that's a massive honor, right? But for Daniel, it was a non-starter. He believed eating it would defile him according to his own laws. So he goes to the official in charge, who, by the way, is completely terrified of the king, and he makes this wild proposal. He says, hey, just test us for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables and water. Talk about a risky move.
Just 10 days. That was the deal. At the end of that time, they'd line them up next to the other captives who were feasting on the king's rich food. And the result? Well, it was something else.
It wasn't just that they looked healthier. When they were finally brought in to meet King Nebuchadnezzar, their minds were just electric. The king found them 10 times sharper in matters of wisdom and understanding than all of his own professional magicians and astrologers combined. So you see, that one small act of faithfulness, that one stand, it completely set them apart and earned them a seat at the table. But that new influence was about to face an absolutely impossible test, because the king was having a problem that all the wise men in Babylon couldn't crack. And the stakes were about to go from personal integrity to life and death for everyone.
I mean, can you imagine this? This is the twisted, brilliant trap Nebuchadnezzar sets. He has a dream that shakes him to his core, but when he wakes up, poof, it's gone. He can't remember it. So he calls in his wise men and demands that they not only tell him the meaning, but first they have to tell him what he dreamed. And if they can't, he's going to have them all torn limb from limb. And what's so fascinating here is the difference in how they react. The Babylonian wise men, they're honest. They say, look, king, what you're asking is impossible. No one on earth can do this. Only the gods could, and they don't hang out with us mortals. They just saw a dead end. But Daniel, who's facing that exact same death sentence, he doesn't panic. He doesn't pretend to have the answer. He just asks for a little bit of time so he can go ask his God for the secret. And believe it or not, the secret is revealed. Daniel goes back to the king and describes this terrifying giant statue. It's got a head of pure gold. That's you, king, and your Babylonian empire, he says. But after you, there's a chest and arms of silver, then a belly and thighs of brass, and finally, legs of iron. Each one is another kingdom that's going to rise up and rule the world, each one a little less glorious than the last. But here's the kicker. This is the climax of the whole dream. The statue, as powerful as it seems, has a major weakness. Its feet are a mix of iron and brittle clay. And then a stone, one that wasn't cut by any human hands, comes flying and smashes the statue right on its feet. The whole thing, the gold, the silver, the iron, it all just shatters into dust and blows away like it was never there. And that stone, it grows into a massive mountain that fills the entire earth. It represents a final kingdom, one set up by God himself that will never, ever be destroyed. So after this, you'd think Daniel and his friends would be set, right? They get promoted, they're in the king's good graces. But you know how it goes. Success breeds jealousy. The next challenges they face won't be riddles or dreams. They're going to be direct, physical attacks, meant to wipe them out simply because they won't compromise their faith. So Nebuchadnezzar, in his pride, builds this enormous golden statue and orders everyone in the kingdom to bow down and worship it. Well, Daniel's friends, who we now know as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they refuse, flat out.
The king is furious and threatens to throw them into a fiery furnace. And this is their reply. It's just incredible. They say, our God is able to save us. But even if he doesn't, we want you to know, king, we are still not going to bow. Their faith wasn't a transaction. It wasn't based on getting rescued.
The king completely loses it. He orders the furnace heated 7 times hotter than normal. It's so hot, the soldiers who throw the men in are killed by the flames. But then, the king is looking into the furnace, and he's just stunned. He yells, "Wait a minute, didn't we throw 3 men in there all tied up?" And his advisors are like, yes, king? And he says, "Well, look, I see 4 men walking around freely in the fire, and they're not hurt at all." Okay, so fast forward a few decades. Empires have changed hands. Daniel is an old man now, serving a new ruler, King Darius. And he's so good at his job, so full of integrity that he becomes the king's favorite. Well, the other officials get insanely jealous. They know they can't find any dirt on him in his work, so they decide to attack the one thing they know he'll never compromise, his faith. They trick the king into signing an unbreakable law. And Daniel, of course, what does he do? He goes home and prays, just like he did every single day. He gets caught, and the king, who is heartbroken about it, has no choice but to throw him into a den of lions. The next morning, the king rushes to the den, hoping for a miracle, and calls out his name. And this is what Daniel calls back. He's brought out without a scratch on him. Not because the lions weren't hungry, but because, as he puts it, God sent an angel to protect him. Now, after everything they'd seen, you would think the rulers of Babylon might have learned a thing or two about pride and power. But Nebuchadnezzar's successor, a king named Belshazzar, he clearly missed the memo. His story is a short, sharp, dramatic lesson in what happens when you mock a power you don't even begin to understand. So get this scene. Belshazzar is throwing this huge rager for 1,000 of his top officials. And in the middle of it all, probably drunk on power and wine, he gets an arrogant idea. He orders his servants to bring out the sacred gold and silver cups that his predecessor, Nebuchadnezzar, had stolen from the temple in Jerusalem. And then he and his court start drinking from them, toasting to their own gods of gold, silver, and stone. A huge act of blasphemy. And in that moment, the party grinds to a halt, because the fingers of a human hand just appear out of thin air and start writing on the palace wall. The king is so terrified, his knees are literally knocking together. He screams for his wise men, but, surprise, surprise, none of them have a clue what the writing means. So who do they call? Once again, they have to bring in old Daniel. He comes in, refuses any reward, and basically tells the king off for being arrogant and for not learning anything from what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. And then he reads the writing. Mene, God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales of justice, and you have come up short. And Perez, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. The fulfillment of this prophecy wasn't years away. It wasn't even weeks away. It was immediate. The text puts it with this chilling, stark finality. That very night, Belshazzar, the king of Babylon, was killed. And the Babylonian Empire fell. Just like that. And this is where the whole story kind of zooms out. It shifts from these amazing personal stories of faith and judgment on individual kings to these huge, sweeping, symbolic visions about the rise and fall of, well, all human empires. Daniel has this vision of a chaotic sea, and out of it come 4 massive beasts. First, a lion with eagle's wings, then a ferocious bear, then a leopard with 4 heads, and finally, a 4th beast so terrifying he can't even describe it, just that it's incredibly strong with huge iron teeth. And all of these beasts, they represent the great world powers that will rise and fall on the earth, kind of like the metals in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And this right here is the ultimate point. After showing this violent, endless cycle of human empires conquering and then crumbling, the vision ends up in a heavenly court. The beasts are judged, their power is stripped away. And then Daniel sees someone like the Son of Man arriving on the clouds of heaven. He's given a kingdom that will never end, a dominion that will never be destroyed. It just leaves you with this final massive thought. What if this whole story isn't just about surviving earthly empires, but about looking forward to a completely different kind of kingdom, one that transcends them all?